Hello and welcome. I'm glad you found me. Welcome to my backyard. I wanted to be as casual as possible. You might even hear my neighbor's kids in the background. My name is Michelle Ingalls, and about 2 years ago, I had this vision of putting together a group of people who want to explore the path of recovery. Recovery from whatever your addiction: drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, sex, technology, shopping, whatever way your addiction has outpictured. And over my 23 years of sobriety from alcohol use, I've explored several different programs, or we could call them frameworks of support for recovery. And my experience has been that all of them have aspects that are valuable, principles and practices that are truly supportive on a path of recovery. So, my vision here is to explore and to practice the best of what these different approaches have to offer. The principles of the 12 step program are brilliant and effective when applied with commitment. The original 12 step program was spiritual in origin, but it was brilliantly designed to fit everyone. So the principles and the practices can be applied by someone with a devout religious belief, or an agnostic, or an atheist. And the cognitive behavioral techniques of SMART recovery, which stands for self management and recovery training. You might be familiar. They're very effective and very user friendly, and I found great value in them. The point of view of Dr. Kevin McCauley on addiction and how addiction fits the disease model is not only informative but enlightening. At least it has been for me. And I've also found the meditation techniques for Dr. Joe Dispenza very effective. He's done groundbreaking research in the study of the brain and how we can change our patterns of behavior by reprogramming our neural pathways. And I've personally changed my life through the principles and the practices of a philosophy called Science of Mind. No, it's not Scientology or Christian Science. Science of Mind is a metaphysical philosophy that's practical and applicable to everyday life. It originated by a man named Ernest Holmes in the early 20th century. And Holmes drew from Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, the science of his day, which was 100 years ago, so things have changed a bit, and from psychology. And all of these approaches have supported me in finding my way to maintain a sober life and really to create a life that I really enjoy living. So my purpose for creating this space is to inform and also to create a space where it's safe for you to share what works for you in your individual recovery. Basically, to share ideas and to support each other no matter where we happen to be on our personal recovery journeys. Eventually, my goal is to possibly put together a real time online Zoom meeting. But first, I'd like to make sure that there's an interest in me doing that, because I know it'll take a lot of time and effort, which is great if people are interested. But let me know in the comments if that's of any interest to you at all. I do want to make clear that I am not professing to be some kind of an expert. I'm on this journey of life, recovery, and transformation just like you. I'm also not here to make some grand promise about how your life is going to be instantly fabulous and there'll be music and rainbows and Care Bears. There's no smoke and mirrors in recovery or life transformation. For the most part, it's genuinely just deciding that you want change and then putting in the effort to create that change. I just want to share with you what has worked for me and hear what's worked for you. It's really my firm belief that community is one of the most positive and important aspects of recovery. So, as for me, I attribute my sobriety to the personal commitment I've made to finding a way to live that's positive and empowering. For me, that's primarily been the Science of Mind philosophy, but all the other sources I've mentioned have certainly contributed to my understanding and the management of my disease of addiction. And although I've not really been formally involved in a 12 step group for several years, I do practice the principles that teach the 12 steps, and they align perfectly with spiritual principles that I live my life by. Um, so let me start by defining how I'm using the term, that both the terms spiritual and addiction, so there's no confusion. So let's start with the word spiritual, or really spiritual living. When I use the word spiritual, I'm not talking about some mysterious force or power out there somewhere. I'm talking about the thing that animates life, the thing that is present when we're alive and gone when we're dead. It's not some mysterious or unearthly force. It's all around us, it's in us, it is us. Um, in my spiritual life, I often use the word spirit or source or divine presence in place of the word God, just because the word God can be highly charged and it can carry a lot of baggage with it. Not that there is anything wrong with the word God. If it means something positive to you, then please use it. I actually find myself using it more and more these days. I just don't want us to trip over the idea of a limiting God. I'm certainly not judging anybody's definition or experience of God. That's yours. And then usually when we say the word or hear the word addiction, we think of an alcoholic, a drug addict, or an obsession with some behavior like gambling or sex. We think of addiction as something that we drink, take, or do, something that we believe will make us feel better or relieve some discomfort, fill some void, even if it's only temporary. And often it's even unconscious. We've all been enculturated to look outside ourselves to feel better. It's just the way our culture is. And of course, addiction is all of those things that I just mentioned, but I think we can broaden our definition of addiction to include any belief that we have that there is something outside ourselves, outside of our inner life, that will resolve the problems of our lives. Addiction is something that we'd like to stop doing, but we can't seem to. And it could be as simple as negative thinking or negative self talk, or as dramatic as heroin use. We may even be able to stop or change for a short while and then we repeat the pattern. Recovery draws us back into a connection with the wholeness that's already within us. At least that's how I see it. And how we participate with a larger life than just ourselves. I love Russell Brand. I love Russell Brand in general, but I love his definition of recovery. He says that in recovery, we recover our authentic self. And my experience has been that our authentic self is that presence, force, or power within us, the larger life. And it's been my experience that it's in our connection to that authentic self, our inner wholeness, that supports us in transforming from the inside out rather than looking for a solution outside of ourselves. Eckhart Tolle said that addiction begins with pain and ends with pain, but that there is a way out, a way to be free from pain. And I have found that to be true. Now, of course, if we drink or take a substance for a long time, we're going to get physiologically addicted to the substance. And it will require some kind of medical detox or support before we can address the problem from a spiritual and a psychological perspective. But ultimately, the process of recovery is looking within to resolve the issues we've been trying to solve by looking outward. I hope that makes sense. So I'd like to go just a little bit in more detail about some of the approaches that I've mentioned. And of course, each video that I do will dive a little more deeply. Some of these things I've used myself, all of these things I've used to some degree in my own recovery, and they've really helped in my understanding of addiction. My first introduction to recovery, any program for recovery, was the 12-step program. And when I first walked into a 12-step meeting, I was ready to try anything to get out of the nightmare of my life, because of my alcoholism. And I found the community supportive. These people could relate to what I was going through. They'd all been through their own hellish nightmare of addiction. And after that first introduction, I stayed sober for 6 years. And then I relapsed for about 2 years. And then, of course, my hellish nightmare began again. And then a friend of mine took me to a Center for Spiritual Living, which teaches the science of mind philosophy that I was talking about. And now I've maintained my sobriety for 23 years. And what I like about Science of Mind is that it's such a practical way to live and a practical way to change your life. I was hooked immediately. And it was Science of Mind that eventually helped me to really see the wisdom and the practicality that was embedded in the 12-step tradition itself. Science of Mind is called a metaphysical philosophy. And usually we think of metaphysics as meaning beyond the physical, because that's really what the word breaks down to. Meta meaning physics, and or meta meaning beyond, and physics meaning the world of form. So metaphysics beyond the world of form. But metaphysics is actually a philosophy that deals with first principles or causes. Aristotle put it like this. He said he called metaphysics the relationship of universals to particulars. We might say the creator to its creation. When I use the word metaphysics, I'm talking about the universal intelligence and order, that larger life that I was referring to, which uses natural scientific laws, and that higher order in relationship to the world of form, to everything we see and experience in our lives. So, in other words, how the invisible, or whatever you want to call it, God, consciousness, source, energy, whatever, how it creates and informs the visible. So the Science of Mind is a metaphysical philosophy that has really helped me connect with that larger life and allow it and the principles that I believe is inherent in God. I'm tripping over my words because I don't want to use that word, and yet I do want to use that word. The principles that are inherent in that larger life, benevolence, peace, order, beauty, that is what informs my life today. And I use it in a very practical way. So sorry, I got tongue-tied there, but it's just the way of things. So I'm also a really big fan of the work done by Kevin McCauley. While serving as a naval flight engineer in the Marine Corps, Dr. McCauley became addicted to opioids, and he spent some time in Leavenworth because of his addiction. And when he was released, he went into treatment, and there in treatment, everybody kept telling him that addiction was a disease, but they couldn't tell him exactly why or how it fit the disease model. So then he made it his life's work to discover how addiction fit the disease model. So I highly recommend the movie Pleasure Unwoven, which is his movie. If you've never seen it, it's wonderful. And in it, he explains exactly why addiction fits the disease model and what that mechanism looks like. It turns out that addiction is a malfunction in the midbrain. And I have a cursory understanding of his research and findings, but he explains it so much better than I can. I also have studied the work of Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I use a lot of his meditation techniques. He's done a lot of research on what's happening in our brains from a neurological perspective and how we create repetitive patterns of thinking, firing the same neurons over and over again, and how those neurons form neural pathways. Of course, he talks about Hebb's law, what fires together, wires together. And as we repeat those same patterns over and over, we activate the limbic system that sends out hormones that create feelings that match those thoughts. And eventually we create what he calls the thinking and feeling loop that teaches our body a new way of being that is familiar to us. And our body literally becomes our mind, and it becomes habitual. And you could say we become addicted to who we think we are. And his work is powerful because he teaches practical skills to change the repetitive patterns that we've created and how to create new ones. And this can be extremely useful for us in recovery. So I just want to say that again, my purpose for creating this space is to have a place to explore the many valuable principles and practices that are available and supportive of a path to recovery. You know, if you'd like to comment about your experience or what you'd like to talk about or what you'd like me to talk about, you know, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And as I've mentioned, I'm very interested in creating a Zoom meeting for those who would like to come together in real time and support each other. So, my intention is to use the 12 steps as kind of a jumping off place to guide our discussion and then bring in other ideas and practices that support the solid basic principles of each step. So, thank you for listening. And I hope you tune in again. And um, I would love to hear from you as well. So, have a wonderful evening, day, whatever it is for you. Thanks. Take care.